Masechet Megilah, Daf 16. We are right at the climax of Megillat Esther when the king cannot sleep, and he says to bring Sefer Zichronot Divrei Yamim Vayihiyun Nikraim, and they were read for the king. This is an unusual syntax. Melamed Shenikraim Me'alehen. Why does it say and someone read them? Why this passive voice? It means that when they opened it up, it was like one of those singing Hallmark cards. You open it up and it starts talking by itself. Perhaps there was nobody there trustworthy to read it and say what it really said, and so it had to read itself. And here also using a passive voice, and it was found that it was written. Why does it say it like that? Ketami ba'aleh should have said it was found that this is written, a noun instead of a verb. Why it was written? Melamed Shimshai Mochek v'Gabriel Kotev. Shimshai was the king's scribe who's mentioned in Ezra, and he didn't want anything good to happen to Mordechai, so he kept trying to erase it. But at the same time, every word he erased, Gabriel, the angel, came and wrote it in again. Maybe the Rasha is really from the word Vayimaseh. It was found. Like last time they looked, it wasn't there. They opened it up again, and all of a sudden, those words are back there. So there was no way to get around it. All right, the text was calling to Achashverosh for it to be known. Amar Rabbi Aseh, darash Rabbi Shela ish kefar temarta. Uma ketav shelemata lizchutan shel Yisrael eno nimchak. Ketav shelema'la lo kol sheken. And so Rabbi Shela learned something from this, that if words that are written down on earth that are for the merit of Israel can never be erased, even if someone tries to erase them, then also all the more so merit up in the clouds, up in heaven, will never be erased, but will always stand there for the good. Lo na'asad imo davar. And then the Achashverosh asks, "Hey, was Mordechai ever rewarded for saving my life?" And they said, "No, nothing was done for him at all." So along with the theme that the advisors of Chashverosh, they didn't particularly like Mordechai, so they didn't, when they emphasized, no, nothing at all was done to him, they weren't saying that for Mordechai's benefit, but rather they all hated Haman. That's one thing that everyone had in common. They were jealous of him, and he was, haughty, made everybody bow down to them, and they knew it would bother Haman to reward Mordechai. So they said, "Oh yeah, no, nothing was done to Mordechai." Hechin lo, and now Haman comes in because he had just set up a gallows to hang Mordechai. But the pasuk doesn't say Hechin le Mordechai. It says that Haman prepared for him. So since the pronoun is ambiguous, Tana lo hechin, what it's hinting to is really Haman prepared this gallows for himself, right? Predicting what will happen just in a moment. Va'asechen le Mordechai. So then Achashverosh says, what should the king do for someone who he loves? And Haman describes it. And then the Vayomer HaMelech leHaman, it's worth reading the whole pasuk, and he says, "Maher kachat halevush v'tasus kasher dibarta." Go and get the royal clothing and the royal horse, just like you said. Va'asechen le Mordechai, and do that to Mordechai. The rest of the pasuk seems superfluous. HaYehudi hayoshev b'shar HaMelech. Like, we know who Mordechai is. You don't have to tell us, the Jew who sits in the king's gate. And then he adds more. Don't omit anything of what you said. So why all those extra words? So the Midrash is going to fill in a whole conversation that required each of these extra words. Amale Manu Mordechai. Haman, he's trying to get out of it. He's trying to make believe he doesn't know what you're talking. He wants to evade the command. So he says, I don't know which Mordechai. There's a lot of Mordechais. Amale HaYehudi. Chashverosh says, you know him, Mordechai the Jew. Amale Tuva Mordechai Kabi Yehudaeh. Haman says it's a common name. There's a lot of Mordechais among the Jews. Amale HaYoshev b'shar HaMelech, the one that's sitting at the king's gate. You know very well exactly which one. After Haman, he's the one that proposed that the king should offer honor in this way to someone who he loves. But now that when Haman realizes it's not himself, but rather it's Mordechai, so Haman says, Why do you have to give him such a great reward? It's enough to give him one village, right? Let him be in charge of that village, collect tax from it. Or give him one river that he can set up a toll booth and collect from the. Why do we have to give him this big public display of honor? Achashverosh is good idea. Do everything that you said and also give him a city or a river. And that's why the pasuk adds, don't omit not even one thing. Haman tried to say, well, let's omit a few things. No, everything you said. And now that Haman tried to do that, Mordechai gets even more honor. So Haman does it. Azal ashkeched yatver Rabbanan kameh. As Haman is approaching, he found that what was Mordechai in the middle of doing? Obviously, teaching a Torah class. And he has students sitting in front of him. And Mordechai was showing the rabbis how to do kimisa. That's how to scoop up a mincha offering or an omed offering, right? With 3 fingers, and then use the other fingers to smooth it out. This is how the korban ha'omed was taken, and that was done on the 2nd day of Pesach. And it so happens that if you do look at the calendar, this happened on the 2nd day of Pesach. Remember, they fasted for 3 days, and so it makes sense. Mordechai is showing them the laws of the day. So Mordechai saw that Haman is coming to approach him, and he's holding on to a royal horse. Mordechai was afraid, not for himself, but more for the students that were with him. Says, this evil person, he's going to come and kill me. Students, you better go away so that you won't be incriminated along with me and be burnt from his coals. Okay. So Mordechai uses his best defense. He puts on a cloak, a talit, and he begins to pray on behalf of his life that Hashem should save him. Again, answering the question in the pshat of the Megilah, we never see Mordechai pray. So in the Midrash adds in lots of prayers. Okay, we'd expect Haman to come and like rip off his talit and say, stop praying. Instead, Haman sits patiently and waits till Mordechai finishes the Amidah. Maybe it takes him a long time. Haman is just sitting there and waiting. And finally, Mordechai finishes praying. Haman is curious. I saw you teaching the students here. What were you teaching them? So Mordechai answered, when the Bet HaMikdash was up, then someone who offered an offering, a mincha, a meal offering, he would bring the meal, and the Kohen would take this handful, and I was showing them how to do that. And if he did that, then he would get atonement. Amar lehu, ata melek kumse kimhadidchu v'dache 10,000 kikere chaspadidi. Haman said, you with your handful of fine flour, you have pushed away my 10,000 pieces of silver. In other words, I paid Achashverosh 10,000 pieces of silver to get the right to destroy you, and you have atonement just by even learning about the laws of mincha offering, even without doing it. You achieved atonement, and now all my plans are going to be foiled for just a little bit of flour, which is much cheaper. Amale Rasha. Mordechai says to this statement, he says, Haman, you evil person. If a slave acquires property, who owns the slave? Who acquires the property? This goes back to Midrash Yomi had mentioned before, that Haman was actually a slave to Mordechai. Haman was out of money, he spent everything and needed bread, and he sold himself into slavery to Mordechai. So then he says, you have 10,000 shekel? That belongs to me, and I own you also. Amar le kum levosh hane mane urchov hay susya de ba'elach malka. Haman finally said, I'm here to tell you that you should stand up and put on these garments and ride this horse, because the king commanded that you should do so. Amar le, right? So I mean that when you read the Megillat Esther, it's powerful enough, right? How much the irony of Haman gets his haughtiness gets flipped, and he's all disheveled, and he has to honor Mordechai. The Midrash is just adding more and more color to it. Amar le la yachilna ad ayelna lebe bane ve'eshkol lemazia. So Mordechai says, "Oh, I can't just get up now and all disheveled from. Remember, he was fasting and wearing tattered clothes. I can't just go and wear these nice clothes like this. First, I have to go to the bathhouse and get ready. Be bane, it might come from the Greek bala neon, missing that lamed, or bane, like baño in Spanish, might be related to this. So I have to go to the bathhouse first, and I have to go get a haircut so I could look proper before putting on royal clothing. It's not wouldn't be proper. Don't you agree, Haman, to wear royal clothing if I'm disheveled like this? I said, okay. Where she's working, he was working together with Esther. Esther behind the scenes closed all the bathhouses, and closed all the umane means any craftsman, but specifically it often refers to a bloodletter, and bloodletters were often also barbers. I guess they're both handling razors. And so Esther had them all closed down so that Mordechai couldn't just go to the local barber and local bathhouse. Haman would have to bathe him and give him a haircut himself. So Haman had to take him to the bathhouse and wash him himself, because all the bathhouse workers had to go home by Esther's orders. And Haman went and got a pair of scissors from his house, and he was trimming Mordechai's hair. And while he was doing that, Haman injured himself and he let out a sigh. Mordechai is like, oh, why are you sighing? What's wrong? So I can't believe a person, meaning me, I was the most important of all of the king's ministers, and now look, I've been reduced to being a bathhouse attendant and a barber, two very lowly jobs. Right? It's always when Haman is already low down, Mordechai gives him an extra kick and says, "Ah, you evil one! So Mordechai says, remember, did you forget you were the barber of this village of Karsum? And there's a braita that mentions that in fact, Haman was the barber for 21 years. So he's reminding him of his lowly past. So after Haman finally finished cutting his hair, puts on the clothing, royal clothing. So then Haman says, okay, get up and ride. Haman's all still begrudging. Mordechai says, I can't, I'm very weak from fasting for 3 days. I don't have the energy to get up on the horse by myself. I need your help. So Haman had to bend down, and Mordechai stepped on Haman's back to get up on top. As he's going up, Mordechai added an extra kick to Haman. Oh, we didn't know that Haman knows his Tanakh. And it says in Mishle, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. So why are you adding insult to injury and kicking me? And Mordechai answers, that's regarding a Jew who falls, so we shouldn't be happy. But regarding you, you evil enemy, regarding you, the Vadim says, and you will tread upon their high places. So I'm treading literally. Mordechai is stepping on top of Haman. And then Haman was calling before him as a herald and said, this is what the king does to someone who he wants to honor. So they're walking all around. Haman is parading Mordechai around the entire city, and they get to Haman's block where he lives. As they get there, the daughter of Haman saw saw them, and she was standing on the roof. Sivara, avu. She figured the person, she was all high, she couldn't see their faces. She figured the person riding the horse must be her father Haman. And the person leading the animal must be Mordechai. So she wanted to add insult to Mordechai. So she took the chamber pot, disgusting, and she threw it on the person leading the horse, which unknowingly she thought it was Mordechai, but was actually her father Haman. He looked up to see who did that, who threw this on my head. And she saw his face, that it was in fact her father. She was all embarrassed, ashamed, and she fell off the roof and died. She was so embarrassed, she committed suicide. Okay, where does the Midrash get all this fantastic story from? Well, they're actually deriving it from the details of the Pasuk, because the Pasuk says, Vayashav Mordechai el Sha'ar HaMelech. Amar Rav Sheshat, Sheshav lesako ultanito. Vayashav, he went back. It doesn't only mean physically that he went back to the gate of the king, but that he went back to wearing sackcloth and fasting, because after all, the decree against the Jews was still in force. And so he went back to his mourning and prayers so that the decree would go back. I mean, he had a temporary high but an honor, but that's it. Okay, that's what we learn from there. The rest of the pasuk says, "Haman nidchaf el beto abel ve'chafui rosh." Haman went back to his kicked back, hastened back to his house. Avel. So there you go. He was in mourning. Why was he in mourning? Avel al bito, because his daughter died. Ve'chafui rosh, and his head covered. Why was his head covered? Al sherat lo, because she threw the garbage on his head. So Haman goes and tells his wife and all of his those beloved to him, everything that happened. And then the next part of the pasuk says, and his wise people and his wife said, oh, if you're going up against someone from the lineage of the Jews, Mordechai, then you are going to fall before him. There's no way you could win out, right? So his own friends are telling him, oh yeah, you're a lost cause, Haman. So a question, at first it calls them his friends, those who love him, and then it calls the people who speak to him the wise men. Why? Anyone who says something wise, no matter what nation they're from, they are called wise. And the point here is that at first there is his friends and his wife. Remember beforehand, his friends and wife said, oh, you should go get him, right? And now once they say something wise, because what they say is, right, you have no chance, Haman, against a Jew. You have no chance against Mordechai. So they said something correct. So despite the fact that they were his friends, nevertheless, they are wise people. They said something true. Listen, if he was from any other tribe, then maybe you would have a chance against him. But if he's from any one of these four tribes, you have no chance against him. Yehuda, because regarding him, it says that in Yaakov blesses Yehuda and says, your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Therefore, Yehuda is always going to be successful over his enemies. Remember, Mordechai was from both Yehudi, he's from Yehuda, and also Ishimini, and from Binyamin. He's from both lineages. So he has that on one side. Another pasuk in Tehillim says, before these three tribes, Hashem, you stir up your might and you protect them, your strength. And so therefore, their point is, if he's from these tribes, and he is from these tribes, Haman, you cannot beat him. Why the double language? Haman, you will surely fall before him. Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Why do we need two fallings? Amru lo. Bnei Israel sometimes are compared to dust of the earth and sometimes to the stars. They're both numerous. Why both? Because this is a people of extremes. When Bnei Israel is downtrodden, there's nobody more downtrodden than them. They're all the way down to the dust. But when they are successful, they say their success goes all the way up to the stars. So that's the double falling. It's kind of like a seesaw, right? When they are down, they're very way down. But when they're up, then you better watch out. You, Haman, are going to be way down. Just then, as Haman's own family is ragging on him, the king's ministers, officials come and they hurry Haman up to come to the second feast that Esther had invited them to. So they brought him while he's all disarray. He didn't even get a chance to shower and put himself together and remember what he had on his head. And so now he has to come all disheveled, discombobulated to the meeting with the king and queen. And they're in the banquet, and during the banquet, Esther tells Achashverosh, says, we've been sold out, me and my people. Okay, the simple meaning of this is that the affliction is not worth the damage to the king, right? Her point, Esther's point is, if they had made my people slaves, I would understand it, because then the king benefits from having slave labor. But instead, this evil person just wants to kill these people, and that affliction is damaging to the king himself. You don't get anything out of it. So you see, it's not even in your best interest to kill the people rather than enslave them. That was Esther's claim. But Midrash is going to read it a little bit differently. So this the affliction is referring to the evil person, meaning Haman. He doesn't care about the damage that comes to the king. How do we see that? This Haman, he was jealous of Vashti and he had her killed. Remember before, it was Memuchan, who was the advisor who told the king, kill Vashti. And the Midrash says that Memuchan is the same as Haman. And so there you go. In Peshat, by the way, it never says that Vashti was killed. She was banished. But the Midrash here, she is killed. And because Haman was jealous of her, and now Haman is jealous of me, Esther. And that's why he wants to kill my people so he can kill me. So her point is, this evil person that I'm about to reveal who he is, he doesn't care about you, Achashverosh. He's the one that killed your last wife, and he's going to kill me too. And the king said, the king Achashverosh said, and it says again, Vayomer, two Vayomers. Why twice? Vayomer lamali, Amar bi abhu, betechila ayedeh turgeman, kevan damra le midibet Shaul ka'atena miyad, Vayomer le Esther hamalka. Esther is about to reveal her true identity, that she is from the house of Shaul. So she has royal blood. So therefore, it says twice Vayomer, because at first, the king would always speak to her through a translator. It's not befitting for the king to speak to someone who is not from a royal family directly, so he speaks to her indirectly. But once she revealed who she is, and she's from royal lineage of Shaul, then he started speaking to her directly, and that's why Vayomer le, directly to Esther Hamalka. Vatomer Esther, ish sar ve'oyev Haman hara hazeh. So Esther reveals the person, and the question is, why all this extra language? You could have just said Haman or Haman hara hazeh. Why the extra ish sar ve'oyev? Okay, when we read it, this is an exciting time when everybody stomps and makes noise. But why did she say it like that? Amar bi el azar melamed shayta mehava kilapeh Achashverosh uba malach v'satar yadah kilapeh Haman. There was a Freudian slip here. She at first she wanted to point. Whenever you say hazeh, it's always pointing to someone. And at first, she was pointing to Achashverosh, meaning ish sar ve'oyev. You, Achashverosh, are the evil person. Shouldn't blame everything on Haman. After all, Achashverosh is the king. The buck stopped there. stops with him. And if he allowed this to happen, really, he's the most evil one. But nevertheless, that would not have been productive right at that moment. We needed to stop this. And so an angel came and pushed her hand, not to the real Ish Sad Ve'oyev, but to the other evil person, Haman Hara Hazeh. Okay, that's a beautiful reading. The king is all angry, gets up in his wrath. And then he goes out to the garden and he comes back. Makishi balakima. Right there, it puts back to back. It says his getting up and leaving and his returning, which means that he was still in the same mood. Makima bechema af shiba bechema. Just like he got up in anger, so too his walk outside didn't calm him down. He came back in anger too. Why? As if things couldn't get worse, the Midrash brings in some angels who made believe they were people, gardeners, and they were uprooting the trees from the king's garden. Bustane, right? And the king said, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you uprooting my beautiful garden?" Haman told us to. And so now he went outside to take a walk to try to calm down. But when he went outside, he saw Haman is trying to ruin his garden also. As he walks in, Haman is falling on the bed with Esther on it. Nafal. Why did it say falling in present tense? It should have been he saw that Haman had fallen. Right? You only fall once. So this teaches that no, he tried to get up, and then an angel came and pushed him down. He would try to stand up, and he would push him down. So he kept falling on her, and therefore made it look like he was assaulting her. Amad vaimi beta vaimi bara. So probably from the word vai yomer, the king says. So we take that vai, and the king says, "Woe in my house and woe outside! Look at this Haman. He's trying to destroy everything in my life, both inside and outside." And the king says, "What, you're trying to take the queen while I'm in the house? You don't even wait for me to leave, and you take my wife." And then just happens to be Harbona is there, one of the servants, and he says to the king, "Oh, look, there's a gallows there, 50 cubits high." He knows all the details about exactly how high it is, right? And Haman made it for Mordechai. Hey, why don't you can use that one? Now, how did Harbona know all about the details of this gallows? Must be he was in on the plot with Haman to kill Mordechai. He was at first evil, and he was trying to get Mordechai hung himself. Once Harbona sees, oh, ties have changed. I see Haman's on the outs now, and he's going to be punished. Miyad barach, so he ran away. A pasuk in the Yov that says, it holds itself at him and does not spare, meaning the evil person, he gets what's coming to him, and his friends all run away from him. Right? Even all the people that are friends with the evil person, once the evil person is cast down, is hurled down, then all his friends run away. And that's Charbona. He's a fickle friend. At first he was evil, but remember him for good. After all, he's the one that suggests to the king, "Hey, you have this gallows here anyway. Why not hang Haman on it?" And Achashverosh takes that advice. After that, the king's anger calmed down. Shachacha is spelled with two chafs. Could just said shacha. Why double? What are there two calming downs? One is the king of the world, meaning Hashem. He was angry at his people, but now he punished them sufficiently, and now he calmed down from his anger and saved them. And the other of Achashverosh, who was calm now after killing Haman, who tried to do all these terrible things. Or others people say that it's Achashverosh himself who calmed down from two things. Number one, from Esther, and two, from Vashti, because Haman did kill Vashti and almost killed Esther. So now the king was calmed down from both of those crimes. Okay, now we're going to go into a detour to Bereshit, the story of Yosef when he reveals himself to his brothers. There are a lot of parallels, and this is one of them. Just like Esther reveals her identity, so too Yosef reveals his identity. And we're gonna bring it back and connect them. Okay, so when Yosef reveals his identity, he gives to all of his brothers a gift of change of clothing, but to Binyamin he gives extra. He gives him 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. That's his full brother. Now, Gemara asks a very insightful question. Can it be that the very thing which the righteous man, meaning Yosef, suffered through, he suffered because of favoritism, because Yaakov showed favoritism to Yosef and gave him the coat, the beautiful coat. That's why all the brothers were jealous of him, and that caused all the problems that we had until now. So that very thing that Yosef suffered because of, is Yosef now going to do the same thing and show favoritism to one brother over the others? בשביל משקל שנס מילת שהוסיף יעקב ליוסף משער אחיו נתגלגל הדבר וירדו אבותינו למצרים. Right, Rav said, look, because of this, just a couple of coins of fine wool that Yaakov gave to Yosef, with the ketonet pasim, right? It's what was, how much was that worth? That extra little wool that he gave him, and yet it caused so much jealousy that Yosef had to go to Egypt, and then the brothers had to follow, and then eventually they stayed in Egypt and they were slaves there. Look at all this, hundreds of years of suffering happened because of a small amount, 2 coins worth of favoritism. So can it be that Yosef will do the same thing now? Now, truth is, it is a bit different. Yaakov should treat all his children equally, while Yosef is entitled to give his full brother an extra present, more than his half brothers. Nevertheless, if Yosef really wants to reconcile them, and he knows they feel guilty, and if he goes and gives extra to Binyamin, and Binyamin is the only one who wasn't involved in selling him, and to everybody else he gives less, they might cause them to feel bad. And at a time when there's a lot of tension there. So that's the question. אמר רבי בנימין בר יפת, רמז רמז לו שעתיד בן לשאת ממנו שיעשה מלפני המלך ב5 לבושי מלכות, שנאמר מרדכי עשה בלבוש מלכות תכלת, and so on. So really what was going on here is the reason why Yosef gave Binyamin extra wasn't to show him favoritism at this time, but rather he was telling him a hint for the future. In the future, there's going to be from you, Binyamin, a man. He's going to be Mordechai, and he's going to receive from the king, from Achashverosh, 5 changes of clothing. And if you look in this pasuk, you see that Mordechai comes before the king, and he's wearing royal clothes, and it's described using 5 different adjectives: techelet, chur, ateret zahav, bus, argaman, and so it's a 5-fold described royal garment. And so that's the parallelism. That's why we got into Yosef giving presents to Binyamin, because Mordechai, his descendant, also gets presents. Okay, going back to Bereshit, it says that Yosef fell on his brother Binyamin's neck, but the word savere is plural. How many necks does he have? He only has 1. Kama severin havu Binyamin. How many necks does Binyamin have? This is plural. Amar Rabbi Elazar bacha al shnei mikdashim she'atidin lihiyot bechelko shel Binyamin. Again, applying the principle of Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, that many of the things that happen to the Avot are really foreshadowings of events that will happen later to their descendants. They were crying about the 2 Batei Mikdash that are going to be in the inheritance of Binyamin in Jerusalem. And so that's the plural. Next, the glory of Binyamin is going to be destroyed. And that's what he's crying about. Binyamin bachal savarav, and Binyamin also cried on the neck of Yosef. Why? Bachal mishkan Shiloh she'atid liyot bechelko sheYosef atid lecharev. Because Shiloh, which is up in the north, in the tribe of Yosef, and that also is going to be destroyed, and that's why they were both crying over future destructions. So then Yosef is trying to convince them, come down to Egypt, I'll take care of you, right? Look, you could see for yourselves with your own eyes. It's me, I'm here talking to you. You can rely on me. And the eyes of Binyamin, he sees me. So the question is, why does Yosef separate your eyes, all the brothers, and Binyamin's eyes, my brother, he sees me too? Why is he separating them? So he's comparing, just like I have no grudge against Binyamin, my brother, because he wasn't involved in selling me. So too, I have no grudge against you, right? You should look at me the same way that Binyamin does, and therefore we're on good terms, and trust me, and I'm going to take care of you. Because it's my mouth that's speaking to you, right? Read my lips, you can trust me. The point is, my mouth is like my heart. I am speaking sincerely to you. So Yosef sends to his father 10 donkeys with all good things from Egypt to give him a gift and to encourage him to come down to Egypt. My mitub Misraim, what does it mean from the good things of Egypt? What was especially good in Egypt? Amar bi Binyamin bar Yefet amar bi Elazar shalach lo yayin yashan shedat zikenim nocha hamenu. He sent him down some good old wine because elderly people like Yaakov will find pleasing and will enjoy this old wine. After Yaakov died, it says that the brothers went and fell in front and prostrated themselves in front of Yosef and pleaded for their lives. Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet, Amar Rabbi Elazar. We're going to see a series of statements by the same rabbi, Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet, and the name of Rabbi Elazar. We had one here. Oh, this is what people say, the common folk saying, when a fox is in its hour, when a fox is on high, bow down to it. Even though a fox is a lowly animal, but if it's having success, then everybody else, even the lion and the other big animals should bow down to the fox. And so too here, all the brothers, even Yehuda, who's like a lion, should bow down, are all bowing down to Yosef, who is the fox. Now we ask a question. Why are you calling Yosef a fox? In what way is he inferior to the brothers to begin with? Yosef is the firstborn from Rachel. He can hold his own. Rather, we're going to quote the same statement of Rabbi Binyamin, but apply it to a different context. Back a couple of chapters before Yaakov dies. It says that Yaakov, he bowed at the head of the bed. And so we apply that. We understand that to mean that Yaakov bowed to Yosef, who was at the head of the bed. So how should a father bow down to a son? And the answer that in this context, it makes sense that yes, even when a fox is up, everyone else should bow down to it. And so Yosef, who's lowly like a fox compared to his father, nevertheless, because now he's second to the king, so even Yaakov will bow down to his son. Okay, when the brothers say, please, Yosef, don't kill us after dad died. So he calms them down and speaks to their hearts. So what does it mean that he spoke to their hearts? That Yosef told them words that will be acceptable to their hearts, that will be convincing to them. And he said, just like 10 candles cannot blow out one candle, so too one candle will not be able to put out 10. The Nimshal is 10 brothers who tried to kill one, Yosef, and they weren't able to because God controls things. And just because you have a plan doesn't mean it's going to happen. 10 can kill one. So too one, meaning Yosef, even if I wanted to, I would not be able to put out the 10 candles, which is all of the brothers. And therefore, everything's okay. Everything's meant to be. Okay, I like how we go from the light of the candles and now we transition back to Megillat Esther, talking about the light there, that the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. What is each of these nouns referring to? Amar Rav Yehuda, Orah zot Torah. V'chen omer kidet ner misvah veTorah or. At that time, they could go back and they could learn Torah. Simcha ze Yom Tov. They could celebrate holidays. V'chen omer v'samachta bechagecha misvah, to be happy on holidays. Sason zo milah. V'chen omer sas anochi al imratecha. This is the one that's hardest to connect. Sason refers to Brit Milah. Because it says, I am joyful about your word. Now, actually, we say this pasuk at a Brit Milah. This is part of the prayer that the father says, like finding a great treasure. And so this is connected to Brit Milah. Number one, al imratecha. The commandment to do Brit Milah is said with the word Bayomer, but probably more than that, it's related to a midrash that David HaMelech once was in the bathhouse and he was sad. He said, I'm not wearing talit or tefillin. I can't learn Torah in a bathhouse. I have no mitzvot with me. And then he looks and sees, oh, wait, I have Brit Milah. And now he's happy because he has Brit Milah everywhere he goes. Okay. Vikad elu tefillin, and honor, that refers to tefillin. V'chen omer v'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Adonai nikra alecha. Pasuk in Devarim, so all the people of the earth will see that you are called by the name of God, and they'll be afraid of you, and so that will give you honor. So that's talking about tefillin. That's like a crown that shows our allegiance to Hashem. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol Omer Elo tefillin shebarosh. Right? This honor is tefillin that we wear on our heads. This is also related to another midrash that Haman banned the fulfillment of these very mitzvot that were just mentioned, Brit Milah and Tefillin and celebrating the holidays. And so now that everything was turned around, they were able to once again observe these mitzvot and holidays. Vet Parshan Data. And then Pasuk goes on and says in Shushan, the Jews slew 500 men, including these 10 names, Aseret b'nei Haman, who are the 10 sons of Haman. Amar Rav Ada demin Yafo, Aseret b'nei Haman va'aseret sarich lememrinu b'neshima achat. Says when you read these words, which are they're written in the Megilah in a special way in 2 columns, and so you have to read all this in one breath, right? All 10 names and the word Aseret at the end, which summarizes it, should all be said in one breath. And if you listen, right, the Chazanim today do this. Why? Because they all died at exactly the same moment, and so all their breath left them. And so, in order to show that their breath they left them all at the same time, we read it all in one breath to show just how quickly all of them were gone. Amar Rabbi, in a way, the Baal Koreh kind of reading this has to hold his breath and is, reenacting that moment. But then he takes another breath and keeps reading. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, vav de vaizata tzarich lemim chatacha bizkifa kemordaya de liberot. When you write the word vaizata, it must be elongated like a long pole of a steering oar of a ship. Because all of these 10 sons were all hung on one pole. And if you look in any Megilah, you'll see this vav here is elongated. And so that's supposed to be a picture of a long pole, a long gallows, and all of them were hung on the same gallows. So there's pictures even in just a regular Megilah that's not illuminated. Every Megilah is illuminated. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa darash Rabbi Shela ish kefar temarta. Kol hashirot kulan nichtavot ariach al gabe libena al bena gabe ariach. So now related to the writing of this and other poems throughout Tanakh. So we learned that all of the poems have to be written with a whole half brick on top of a whole brick and a whole brick on a half brick. In other words, like Shirat Hayam, right? If you look in the Torah, it appears like this, where you have a half brick, that's a short word, and then a long one in the middle, and a half one at the end. And then the next one is 2 at the edges, and the next one is short and long and short. So that actually looks like brickwork. right? Everything held together tightly, everything resting upon each other. That's the standard way that we would write a shira, like Shirat Hayam. However, there are exceptions, except for this poem, even though it's just a list of names, but it's a list of names of enemies who were killed. So that's a poem too. That's something to sing about. And so this is written not as bricks, but rather as two columns. And also in Sefer Yoshua lists all the kings of Canaan that were defeated by Yoshua. That also a list of evil people, and is written in straight columns. That you have half on top of half and whole on top of whole, right? Not intermixed, but straight down. And the reason is because they should never be able to rise from their downfall. If you write it like this looks like stairs, right? You can go from here and jump onto here and climb back up. Whereas here, this is just like a chute, right? And you go straight down and there's nothing to stand on to get back up. So this represents their downfall. Okay, there is another shira, which is written in this way, that's not listed among these exceptions, and that's Ha'azinu. It's also written in two columns, so that's strange. How come it doesn't mention it here, and why is that mentioned in two columns? Well, Ha'azinu is also about the downfall of sinners. It just happens to be about Bnei Israel. When Bnei Israel are sinning, then Hashem punishes them. At the end, though, however, the evil nations who come and punish Bnei Israel, they get what's coming to them, and they get punished too. And so since that also is about punishment and downfall, perhaps that's why Ha'azinu also was written in that way. Perhaps this can explain why in the Aleppo Codex, and only in the Aleppo Codex, 3 of the lines of Ha'azinu are longer than the rest. They stick out. And maybe that's meant to be stairs for Bnei Israel. After they make teshuvah, they can climb up those 3 lines and maybe get back to the top. Okay, I heard that idea from Rabbi Ephraim Gabai. And so far, it's the best answer to the layout of the Aleppo Codex Ha'azinu that I've heard. Okay, Vayomer HaMelech le'Esther HaMalka b'Shushan HaBira haregu haYehudim. Okay, so now the king comes to Esther and she says to her, in the capital of Shushan, they already killed 500 men, and the 10 sons of Haman they killed, and everything else that they did in the provinces. If you stop right there, it sounds like the king is telling Esther, okay, so much destruction has happened already. Isn't that enough, right? Okay, you got your revenge. And he would have put a stop to it. But instead, an angel miraculously appeared and slapped Achashverosh on his mouth to get him out of that mood and say the opposite. Instead of saying, Esther, stop, he said, okay, what else would you like? What else can we do for you? And so now he switched his attitude. Okay, and then the rest of it, she says to the king, he said with a letter. Okay, this pasuk is a little hard to translate no matter what. The Peshat seems to be saying that she said to the king that Amar ima sefer, it should be declared with this letter that and so on. That this should be become a holiday forever. But instead we're putting but the question is, Amar, it should be Amrami Ba'ale. If she comes to the king, then she should be saying something, and she should be saying, as follows. So why does it say masculine instead of feminine here? Amar Bionatan Amra lo Yamer Bape Mashekatu Basefer. And so the answer is you have to start the open quotes here. When she came to the king, she said, open quotes, Amar Ima Sefer, I want it to be said what's written in the letter. In other words, you wrote a letter, Achashverosh, to say, okay, the Jews can go defend themselves and everything is going to be good, but don't just write it down. Also, I want it to be pronounced everywhere. I want everybody to say it out loud. Sometimes, people don't read a letter that they might get in the mail, and so it wants you to back it up with being pronounced. Another interpretation is that she's referring to the reading of the Megilah, that the Megilah should not just be written, but also it should be read in public every year. Divrei shalom ve'emet, words of peace and truth. Amar bi tanchum avamdila amar bi asi melamed shesiricha sirtut kamita shel Torah. So why is the writing of the Megilah called words of peace and truth. What do you mean truth? That when you write the Megillah, one of the halachot is that you have to engrave lines in it so that the lines will be straight, just like the truth of the Torah. So either that means a Torah scroll, or maybe even more, because what's the truth of the Torah? Might be referring to a mezuzah, because that is halacha according to everybody. The mezuzah has to have those lines inscribed. And so the truth of the Torah would be the essence of the Torah that testifies, is our testimony to it, like when we recite the Shema, and that's our pledge about the truth of the Torah. So just like a mezuzah, so too the Megillah has to be written with that special halacha. Ma'amad Esther kiyam, ma'amad Esther in divrei samot la. So way at the end it says that the decree of Esther was confirmed regarding these matters of Purim. Now in Peshat it might be simply talking about the command of Esther that everybody should celebrate this day. But we're taking it to mean not only that command, but rather the statements that Esther said in order to bring about the redemption, all the conversations she had. So how come it says her statement and not her fasting? Didn't her fasting play a big role in bringing about the redemption? Amar Rabbi Yochanan divrei hasamot u'ma'amad Esther kiyam et hapurim ha'eleh. And so Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, read this pasuk along with the next one. It says not only her words, but also the fasting that she decreed. That's what brought about the celebration. Okay, at the end, Mordechai becomes second in command to Achashverosh, and he is great among the Jews and accepted by Rav. The simple meaning is to the great masses of his brothers. But Rav could also mean the majority. But majority means not everybody. When Mordechai got this promotion and became second in command, so the majority of his colleagues supported him, but some didn't. Some of the members of the Sanhedrin separated themselves from him. Like, yeah, it's nice that you're second in command, but now you're not going to learn Torah as much. You're not going to have enough time. So they kind of look down on him. It's like nowadays when a scientist or academic writes a popular book and becomes famous, everybody else is like, he's a fake academic. Look how it became popular and so important. Now he's not going to have time to do real things. Amar Rav Yosef, Gadol Talmud Torah yotem hasalat nefashot. We learn from here that Talmud Torah is greater than saving a life. How so? I mean, this does not immediately. It doesn't mean that you see someone drowning and you're reading a book that you just ignore him. But the point is, like here, Mordechai is putting himself in the position that he may be able to save the Jewish people in the future. Nevertheless, he was criticized for not learning Torah, right? Instead of taking that position. Because look at Mordechai's position. First, he's mentioned fourth, and then he's mentioned fifth. This is in lists that we find in Book of Ezra Nehemiah. Mordechai becomes second in the list in Ezra chapter 2. Mordechai is mentioned in the fourth place, so he's fourth in importance. Mordechai Bilshan, and after that he's mentioned fifth. So you see he's demoted from the beginning to the end of the story once he gets a position of authority. And last statement for today. Amar Rav Item Rav Shemuel Bar Marta Gadol Talmud Torah Yotem Binyan Bet HaMikdash. Learning Torah is greater than building of the Bet HaMikdash, right? Bet HaMikdash is, my Mashiach come. Everybody say, come, build the Bet HaMikdash. If you're in the middle of studying your Daf Yomi, don't leave, right? Someone else can build it. Learning Torah is more important. Shekol Zman Shebaruch Ben Neriah Kayam Lo Nichu Ezra Ve'ala. The question is, how come Ezra waited so long to go to Israel? He was in Babel for a long time. What was he waiting for? And the answer is because Baruch ben Neriah, he was a great sage, and Ezra learned from him. So while Baruch ben Neriah was alive, Ezra had to study Torah with him. So he says, sorry, I can't go help and rebuild Israel. I can't go help rebuild the Bet HaMikdash. Even though in Peshat, Ezra is in 450, 60, 70 years later, after the Bet HaMikdash was already built. But in the Midrashic chronology, Ezra went to help build the Bet HaMikdash. But nevertheless, that had to wait till he finished studying with Baruch ben Neriah, and only then he went to build the Bet HaMikdash. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.